What's up again, everybody? It's October, which means it's Halloween season, baby. So we are talking horror all month long. I'm Clayton. Welcome back to Ages of Film, or if this is your first time, welcome. While you're here, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. If you're enjoying the content, it helps the channel out a lot. As you can tell by the title, today we're reviewing the movie It, Stephen King's It. This is the TV movie version from 1990. Technically, it was actually a mini-series that was released in 1990. It has been made into a movie now. You can buy it on DVD. You can buy it on Blu-ray. So there's a full movie version of this film. But originally it was kind of a TV miniseries. So some people don't technically consider it a feature film, which I guess it's technically not. Although, like I said, nowadays you can buy a digital physical copy of the movie itself today. So we're going to talk It from 1990 today. This is one of those movies that I did grow up with. I've mentioned multiple times on my channel, I didn't grow up with a lot of horror, but there were a few exceptions. There were certain horror movies that I did see as a kid and have grown up with, and this is one of them. I think I saw it for the first time when I was about 7 or 8, maybe, and for a kid that hadn't really seen much horror prior to seeing this film, yeah, this did a number on me, man. This movie genuinely scared me into my nightmares. So, and a lot of that comes down to Tim Curry's performance as Pennywise, which we'll get into here in a few minutes. But yeah, so I am very familiar with this movie. I've seen it multiple times, watched it again for this review, and it was good to come back to it. I had seen it, I think in a few years, this version of it anyways, in a few years. So I was happy and excited to come back and give it another viewing. Released in 1990, directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, and it based on the Stephen King novel of It, which I have not read. I'm not really a big reader. I don't really read novels or books, stuff like that. So I have not read the novel, but honestly, I don't really care or feel the need to do so. A lot of people are really sensitive when it comes to movie versions of books, and they feel like movie versions have to be line for line, verbatim, what's in the book. And I can't but disagree with that notion. Movie and novel are two completely different formats of storytelling. You cannot project the rules of one onto the other. It doesn't work that way. They're two different mediums of storytelling, two different art forms. So yeah, I'm not one of those persons that says, well, they didn't go back by the book, so I can't like it because they didn't do everything that's in the book. Okay, well then just read the book. You don't have to like the movie. No one's making you like the movie or saying you need to like the movie. I just feel like, me personally, people that judge movies based on books by the standard of the book is not fairly judging the movie properly, because movies aren't books. It's a completely different format of storytelling. You have to take it on its own terms and view it through the medium that it was made in, which is film. So anyways, that's neither here nor there. Just as a reminder, everyone, sorry for that little rant. Before I get into the actual review here, this is just my opinion on this movie. No need to be upset or offended by anything I have to say about this film. If you disagree, that's perfectly fine. All I ask that you be respectful about your opinion and mine in the comment section, but feel free to leave your thoughts of this movie there. All right, let's talk It 1990. Starting with the positives as always, moving into the negatives. So this movie, starting with the positives here, I'll just say this: I do still like this movie. All right, I do still like this movie. However, I think it was certainly more effective as a kid, watching it as a kid, than it is watching it as an adult. When you watch this as an adult, you start seeing and start noticing more problems that arise viewing it as an adult. As a kid, you're just following the story. You're just, you're engaged with the characters. You're scared as hell of Pennywise. And you're just taking it for what it is. But when you come back to it as an adult, you start seeing things. You're like, I wouldn't have picked up on that as a kid, but as an adult, you start noticing it. But I still like the movie. So the things I like about it, 1990 version, starting first with the story, I do think it's an interesting concept of a story. You have the story about this entity that feeds on the fear of children every 30 years. So it comes back every 30 years to feed on children. At least that's this version. I know in the 2017 version of it, I think it's every 28 years. 26 or 28 years, but in the 1990 version, it's every 30 years. So every 30 years, this entity comes back and feeds on the fear of children. And in order to feed, it has to take a physical form in order to feed on physical kids, on physical people, right? So I think that's an interesting concept because there's a lot you can do with that. There's a lot of different directions you can go. I feel like there's a lot of different stories that you can involve with that, especially if this is an entity that is centuries and centuries old, has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. There's a lot of stories that you can tell over those centuries about, the different victims that have fallen to this entity. So I do like the story because it's an interesting story, and I feel like there's a lot you can do with it. So the story for me here would be a positive, although there are also some issues with the story that I'll get into when I get to the negatives. But on paper, the premise, the concept of it, I do like. I find that as a positive because of the ingenuity involved in it and all of the direction possibilities that you can take that premise into. So that would be a positive for me. I also did like some of the production design in this movie. I still think looks pretty good. They didn't have like a super large budget for this movie. I think the budget was somewhere around $9 million for this, which is a decent amount, but it's not, like some of the. It certainly doesn't compare to the budget of the It 2017 version, which had a much, much larger budget and was able to do a lot more because of that. This was a $9 million budget, which isn't a small, but it's not just a huge budget either. But the production design, I thought looked pretty good. Tommy Lee Wallace directed this movie. Fun fact, he started out as a production designer. He was the production designer on the original Halloween, John Carpenter. He also directed Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. But he started out as a production designer. So you would think that he would know how to kind of create and design a really good looking production. And he does, because I think the production design here still looks really good. You can tell it's all practical. They built everything here. They weren't using CGI or green screens for most of it. There were a couple places where they had to use green screen, but most of this was actually built. It's an actual production designed for the film, and I think it still looks good. So that would be a positive for me. Also, the makeup and costumes look pretty good. You know, some of the makeup that they did on Pennywise, obviously on Tim Curry, still looks really good. But also the makeup effects on some of the creatures and like zombie type of scenes in the movie, like with Beverly's dad when she sees him as an adult and he's like zombified, and some of the makeup effects there looked really good. And some of the other characters in the film, side characters, I thought the makeup looked really good in this movie, and especially on Pennywise. That Pennywise makeup, that's my version of Pennywise. When I think of Pennywise the clown, I think Tim Curry Pennywise, and that look, that makeup, that costume, to me that is Pennywise. So I thought the costume and makeup in this film also was pulled off pretty well, and still looks pretty good to this day. Also, I do like some of the practical effects in this movie. I like that Tommy Lee Wallace always leans towards practical effects. He did come up in the camp of John Carpenter, so he worked with Carpenter a lot. He learned a lot from Carpenter, and that's one carryover that he has in his films, is he tries to do everything practically if possible. And that's something I appreciate and respect about him as well. And there were practical effects in this movie that I do still think holds up and still looks pretty good. The dinner scene with the fortune cookies that come apart and they're like these little crab or weird little creatures. Some of that stuff still looks pretty good. It's aged some of the effects work has aged, but some of it also I still think looks pretty good. So, and at the end of the day, regardless if it holds up well or not, the fact that they did do most of it practically is something that I appreciate with filmmakers. Any filmmaker, if they go for it practically and it doesn't look as good, I will still give them the respect and appreciation for doing it practically and not just relying on CGI to make things work. So regardless of whether or not all the practical effects in this movie still hold up or still look good, the fact that Tommy Lee Wallace decided to still go for it and still try to make things as practical as possible, I appreciate. I like that. I respect it. It's a positive for me. And I do think some of the effects work still looks pretty good. 35 years later. So that would be another positive for me. The cinematography here, I think, also is a positive. I like the look of this film, especially in the first half, when it's the story of the kids, the flashback scenes when they're kids. I think the setting and the tone, the look of the film with the cinematography, I think captures the look and the feel of the 1960s, when I guess that part of the story would have taken place. Because when they're adults, the second half takes place in 1990. It comes back every 30 years, so 30 years prior would have been 1960. And I think that the cinematography and the look and the tone of this movie fits that setting really well. And I like it. I do like the look of this film. There's a couple of places where I feel the lighting was a bit off. I would have darkened a couple of scenes. I would have lightened a couple of scenes. I think the exposure was a little bit off in a couple of places, but that's nitpicking, really. That's not like anything. Overall, I think the cinematography here was a positive. And the way that they use the camera, I thought was really cool. There's one scene in particular, the dinner scene, when they all meet back up as adults for the first time, and they're at that Asian restaurant having dinner, and the way that Tommy Lee Wallace shoots their interaction and conversation, it's a panning shot. It's a continual panning shot that's looping the whole time, and then it stops, and then it'll go the other way, all the way around. And that's an interesting way to shoot that interaction. It's not a bunch of cuts that are blended in together. It's one continual panning shot where you get all the characters together. You can see that they're all there together interacting. I think it feels more personal because of that. It's not just a bunch of cuts and stuff that's, may take you out of that moment or that interaction. So I did like the directing of Wallace in that scene particular. That was a scene that stood out to me with the cinematography and how they shot that scene. So, and there were a number of scenes like that actually that I thought stood out, and just the way that Tommy Lee decides to direct a few of those scenes was really good. So, and then the characters. So let's talk about the characters that were also a positive, because we're still in the positive right now. So the positives with the characters, I will say, I do like all of the adult versions of these characters over the kid versions of these characters in this particular movie. Now, in the 2017 version, I think I would probably prefer the kids over the adults. But in the 1990 version, I do prefer the adults over the kids. I feel like we spend more time with the adults in this movie, so we're able to see more of their personalities come out. We invest a little bit more in them. I think they have more character moments of testing with them that makes you like them more, because you see them tested and you see them making the right choices to have integrity and courage and to fight. So I do like the adult versions over the kids in this movie. And I do like all 7 of the main characters, the Losers Club, as they call themselves. I do like all 7 adult versions of these characters. I also liked, and I'll get to Pennywise in a minute. I will say the one kid version that I would prefer in this movie over the adult version is Henry Bowers. I loved Henry Bowers, the kid version of Henry Bowers in this movie, much more over the adult version, and that's going to be something I talk about in the negatives. But the kid version of Henry Bowers, strong positive. He really played that bully character really well. I totally bought him in that role. He seemed like just a little evil turd that you just want to smack multiple times, and he was very convincing in that role, and you really did hate that guy in the movie. And I thought he played the kid that played him, I thought played him really well, but also the way he was used and written, I thought the kid version of Henry Bowers was really good in this movie. It's like he had moments where you really see how evil he was, like when he's picking on Mike outside the movie theater in their flashback scene. Like, it's the middle of the day, they're out in public, and it's like Henry doesn't even care. He sees a chance to bully this kid, and he's going to take it. And it adds to that layer of evil in Henry that I loved. Also seeing him pick on Beverly, like he doesn't discriminate. So I did really like Henry as the kid version of Henry. I thought they didn't they didn't try to make you sympathize with him or show much of his backstory like I feel like they do a little bit in the 2017 version. I actually prefer the kid version of Henry Bowers in the 1990 movie over the kid version of him in the 2017 rendition, because I feel like they really focus on him being the bully, being the evil bully in this movie. In the 2017 version, they show some of his story with his dad and kind of gives you this empathetic feeling towards him, which I don't really like. If I'm meant to hate the character, I want to hate the character. I don't want there to be, little soft emotional feelings with a character to make me feel bad for him. No, if I'm meant to hate the character, make me hate the character. And I feel like 1990 it did that with Henry. Like there's not really anything with Henry that you're left feeling sorry for. Like this guy's just an evil dick bully. And I love it. So I loved how he was used in this movie. The kid version of Henry I thought was really good. But let's talk about Pennywise, because he is definitely the standout for me with this movie. Always has been, always will be. Tim Curry as Pennywise. Just incredible performance. What he gave to that character, the charisma, the charm, the energy that he brings is just something special. I absolutely love his version of Pennywise. It is still the best in my opinion. I think is it Bill Skarsgård that played him? There's so many Skarsgårds out there. I always forget which one is which. I think it's Bill Skarsgård that plays Pennywise in the 2017 version. And he's good. He's perfectly fine as Pennywise. But I personally much prefer Tim Curry as Pennywise. To me, I think he's a scarier version of Pennywise. He's more convincing as Pennywise and as an evil clown. And I think he brings more charisma and charm. He's more memorable as Pennywise, in my opinion. So, love the character of Pennywise. Very dark, very creepy, very scary. And a lot of that, again, comes down to how Tim Curry played that character and what he brought to that character. The voice, man, that voice is just so menacing and creepy and eerie voice that he brings to Pennywise, and then just his mannerisms, the stuff that he does with his face, the stuff that he does with his body, his little wave, it's all the stuff in his body, the stuff in his face, the voice. He really becomes that character Pennywise and brings it to life and just really makes it something special. And he scared me as a kid. He truly chased me into my nightmares. I remember having nightmares of Pennywise as a kid. I'll admit it, and it was Tim Curry that brought that out of it. So yeah, love. Again, this is my version of Pennywise. When I think of Pennywise, I think Tim Curry. So I know some people, you ask them, who do you think of when you think of Pennywise? They'll say Bill Skarsgård, and that's great. For me, if you were to ask Clayton, who does Clayton think of when he thinks of Pennywise? Tim Curry and what he brought to that role. Obviously, there's a lot of nostalgia in that because I grew up with Tim Curry as my Pennywise, but also I've seen both the 1990 version of it and the 2017, 2019 version of it multiple times. I've seen both of them multiple times. I genuinely think Tim Curry is a scarier Pennywise than Skarsgård. To me, it's hit the intensity that the way that he delivers his lines and the look in his eyes, in his face, the intensity that he brings to Pennywise, the anger, the aggression, just that tensity that he brings to the character is much more frightening and intimidating to me than Bill Skarsgård. Skarsgård plays Pennywise. I feel like there's a number of scenes where he kind of plays him kind of goofy and fun and silly. You don't really get that with Tim Curry. Like Tim Curry is always playing Pennywise in a very dark, scary, menacing, intense type of way. Now he'll bring some silly, playful, coy attitude with it, but it's all in a dark, menacing, intense way that he does it. So for me, again, it's subjective. I personally think that Tim Curry is the scarier Pennywise. He's more intense. He's more memorable. And yeah, he is and will always be my Pennywise. So yeah, he's definitely the strong point for me in this movie. Great character. And then, like I said, the adult versions of the characters I like over the children. I just feel like they have more moments of testing. Like there's the scene when they're leaving the hotel and they've all decided just leave. Let's just go. We're not going to stay around and fight this thing again. Let's dip. And Bill has the moment where he stands and he makes the decision. He has his moment of testing in the film. Do I stay or do I go? And he decides to stay and fight this evil entity. He does not want to live in fear anymore. He's had it. He's had enough. He's tired of it. He's tired of running. And he makes the conscious decision to stay, face his fear, and fight it. And I love that. That's a good character moment for Bill. That's a moment of testing. You bring the character to a plot height where the character has to make a decision that's going to impact the rest of their story. And Bill has that moment, and in that moment, he chooses to stay and fight. And it's good character writing for the character, and it makes me like that character more. You get the same thing with Eddie when they're in the cave fighting the spider creature, and Eddie also has that moment where he remembers as a kid how he had the courage to stand up to Pennywise and spray him with his little asthma spray inhaler. And again, he has that character moment as an adult where he could stay where he's at and kind of cowered behind the rocks and let his friends face the spider, or he could find that same courage in himself to face his fear and stand and fight. And he makes the decision to do that. He stands and fights. So I just feel like the adult versions had more of those character arcs, had more of those character moments that made me like them more and make me invest in them more because of the decisions they make, how they're willing to face their fear. And you spend more time with them. You feel like you know them a lot more than the kid versions. And yeah, I really enjoyed the adult versions of these characters more than the kid versions. Outside of Henry Bowers, who again, stud. But yeah, and the acting I thought was good by the lead, the adult characters as well. I thought they all gave pretty good performances as well in those roles. So moving on to the negatives now with this movie, and there are unfortunately several negatives that I do have with this movie that have kind of grown on me over time. As I watch this movie more as an adult, I start seeing more things in it that I'm like, it wasn't really well done. But again, it doesn't make me not like this movie. I do still like it, but I don't know that it has aged as well as some other horror movies have. So let's talk about the negatives that I have with this film. Starting first with the story. I know in the positives I said that the story was a positive, in the premise and the concept of it is a positive, but where I feel like the story becomes a negative is in the structure of the story. I don't particularly like how this story was structured in this film. I think the 2017 version of it does a much better job at handling the story, and the way they tell the story and the structure of it is much better handled in the 2017 version. And the reason for that is because this is a non-linear story. So you start off with the characters in their adult versions, and the only moments that we really see with them as kids are flashback scenes. Where in the 2017 version, it's more chronological. You start with them as kids, and you stay with them over time through their journey until they become the adult versions of the characters in the part 2 in 2019 film. So I think the chronological structure that the 2017 approach takes, I think is a better way to tell this particular story than the non-linear structure of the 1990 version. There are stories that I do think are better told non-linear than in a linear way. It depends on the story. It depends on what story you're telling as to how you're going to approach the structure of that story, telling the structure of that story. And when you have multiple characters like you have in It that you're trying to follow, you're trying to tell all of these character stories, I feel like, and this is just my opinion, it's better structured when you're telling it chronologically like they do in 2017 than in flashback non-linear scenes like they do in the 1990 version. That's my problem with the story here, is the non-linear structure of this film I don't think serves the characters justice, because their first interactions with Pennywise is what establishes that fear in them. So the way to make you as an audience member connect with them in that fear and connect with them as kids is to tell their story as kids. But when you're introduced to the characters already as adults and all you get is just flashback scenes of the first time they encountered Pennywise, it makes me not connect to the kid versions of the characters the way that telling the story chronologically would have. And that's the example that is the 2017 version. The 2017 version makes me connect a lot more to the kids because the story is told chronologically. And I spend an entire film with these kids in their fight against Pennywise, in their struggle, in their fears. It's a full story of them as kids, not just flashback scenes. So for me, that is a negative with the story in the 1990 version of It, is the way that it's structured. I feel makes me disconnect from the child versions, the kid versions of these characters that I don't want to have with them. So that would be a negative for me in the story structure. Also, I feel like the way that they bring these characters back together when they're adults is a bit weak. Just having them come back together over a promise that they made when they were kids, I don't know that I buy that. I mean, I'm not even as old as those characters are in their adult versions. I'm in my 30s, but I can still tell you that if one of my childhood friends phoned me up, was like, "Hey dude, remember that promise that we made when we were 9 years old? Hey, we need to fulfill that promise now." I'd be like, "Look, dude, that was over 20 years ago. We were kids. I have my own life right now. I got my own stuff going on. I ain't doing it. Maybe that makes me look bad. I don't know, but I just feel like all these adults had their own lives. Like they're all have, for the most part, except for Mike, have been really successful in their careers, and they all have like jobs and families. Like they're all doing their own things in life, and they're just going to leave all that because of a promise that they made to each other when they were kids. Like I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I feel like that's a bit lazy writing. I feel like there was better ways. I mean, obviously they had to bring these characters together somehow. Otherwise, we don't have the second half of the movie. They had to bring them together somehow as adults. But there's a number of ways they could have done that. I just feel like the way that they did it, just, we made this promise when we were kids. Do you know how many promises kids make to each other about stuff like that? All the time. And you never think about it when you're adults. You have no plans on keeping it once you become an adult, because you have your own life. You made your own life. You have your own career and stuff that you're focusing on. Maybe that's something really picky, but to me, that's something that does, when I watch this movie now, it does kind of bother me, because I just don't know that I buy it. I'm sitting there watching and listening. I'm like, they're coming back together over just a promise that they made when they were 10 years old, and they're just going to leave everything they have going on right now. Okay. That may not bother some people, but for me, it's kind of an issue for me. Other problems I have with the writing still, I also feel like there was some filler in this movie. This is something that I don't know that I've caught on previous viewings, but there's definitely some filler in this movie, more so in the second half when we're with the adults. One scene in particular is the scene with Bill's wife, Audra, and the movie producer when he comes to visit her and tells her, like, look, you need to stay on this project, otherwise you're fired or whatever. That whole scene wasn't needed. We didn't need that scene at all. If you take that scene out of the film, it doesn't change anything. Someone might say, well, you needed that scene because that's what leads her to come to Bill in Derry. Okay, but you don't need to show that scene. You could have simply had her arrive in Derry and simply say she had a phone call from the producer saying Bill needs to come home or else they're both off the project. There you go. And us as the audience members, we have a high enough intelligence to be able to put those things together. We don't need to be spoon-fed everything. That scene didn't really serve any purpose to the film. You could take that out. It doesn't change anything. Honestly, I think most of the stuff with Bill and Audra wasn't needed. All you need to show us is that Bill is married. He has, his relationship with his wife and his career. That's kind of where he's at present day. That's all we really need. We don't need more scenes with Audra in the film. We don't need, him having to go in Pennywise's lair to rescue his wife. We already know why Bill's there. He's there because of Georgie, his brother that he lost when he was a kid. That's his motivation to go after Pennywise. You don't need to add another thing in there for him to have to go in and save his wife. So all of that stuff, I feel like you could cut out and you still have the same story. You still have the same character moments and testing for Bill in the film. So that would be something that I would say and argue was filler. Also, the scene when the six of them are in the hotel lobby living room area, and they're all recollecting on different moments that they encountered Pennywise or other childhood moments. That whole scene, again, not needed. Cut that out and take it out of the film. It doesn't change anything. We already know that they've had encounters with Pennywise where we already know the kind of trauma that Pennywise has inflicted on them. We already know the reasons why they're there. So that scene didn't really tell us anything that we didn't already know about these characters. I just feel like it was just there to eat up some more screen time, but it was filler. It wasn't needed for the story. So there was definitely some filler in the second half of this film that I don't think was really needed. It was kind of entertaining, some of those scenes, but as far as script writing, it would stuff in the script that doesn't need to be there because it doesn't really affect anything in the script or in the story. So that would be another negative for me, is just some of the filler there that I feel like you could condense the runtime down and still have the same story without all that added extra stuff in there. Also, let's just go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room, the spider. All right. So Pennywise ends up just being this giant spider at the end. The effects work there on that spider doesn't look very good. The effects, the green screen and the computer stuff that they were doing doesn't hold up very well, doesn't look very good. And the way that he's defeated ultimately, I feel, was very anticlimactic. There was really no plot or tension in that moment. I mean, the characters, these adults go down into his little cave with no tension. There's nothing that's like, there's no plot. Plot is tension. And there's no tension in that scene that they have to go through to get to Pennywise, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like there should be things that they have to go through before they get to Pennywise, and they really don't. All they do, I mean, Billy sees Georgie and he has his little moment with Georgie, but that's it. You know, then they go in, the three of them see the deadlights. You have Beverly shoot Pennywise with the stones, and that's it. And then they just go stomp the crap out of him, stomp a mud hole into him, and that's it. He dies, and they pretty much beat him. It was a very easy defeat of this character that has been around and preying on kids for centuries. I just felt like it was a very, very anticlimactic, lazy way to kill Pennywise. I feel like it almost felt rushed, like they were just trying to end it, trying to wrap it up in the production. It's like, all right, we've been going for 3 hours. Let's just wrap it up, have them get through the cave, have them kill Pennywise, boom, and be done with it. The reveal of Pennywise as a spider doesn't necessarily bother me because, again, we're told that in order to feed on physical humans, it has to take a physical form. So he has to take a physical form of something in order to feed on these kids. If he just took the physical form of a clown, what's going to do more damage? A physical clown human or a giant spider with long ass legs and teeth that can take out more people at once than just a clown can? Right? So, I mean, to me, it wasn't necessarily the reveal of him as a spider that bothers me, because, again, it had to be a physical form to take out multiple people. What bothers me is, one, the look of the spider and the effects doesn't really look good at all. It doesn't really hold up. And then the way in which he's defeated is just so nonchalantly, it's just so lazily, and he's beaten very easily in the film. And that's something that bothers me, is just the lack of plot and tension and effort that they really have to go through in order to beat Pennywise is an issue for me. But Yeah, that seems to bother a lot of people with him being I'm terrified of spiders. That's my number one fear. So it definitely, it works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but yeah, that was definitely an issue. And then the last scene with Billy, with Bill and his wife Audra, when he's trying to bring her back, and the way that he decides to try to bring her back is by putting her on a bike that he hasn't rode pretty much in 30 years and driving down Main Street with traffic, pretty, heavy traffic. It's like you're putting your wife in harm's way. Like, you're putting her in more harm potentially just to try to bring her back. Like, that doesn't make any sense. You would think he would try to, you could write something better in there than, oh, let's just throw her into, oncoming traffic where she could potentially get ran over and die. But no, yeah, it's just, yeah, I don't know. I just felt like that, again, that was, it was writing that didn't really make sense. No logic was really put into that as far as, how are we going to bring her back? I know, put him on a bike, have him drive down the street with oncoming traffic. That makes a lot of sense. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Yeah, and then a couple other negatives here. I know we've been going on long, but I want to be thorough in this review. Henry Bowers as an adult, incredibly underwhelming. He really doesn't do anything. Like, all he does is just show up one scene as an adult where he wrestles with Mike a little bit, and that's pretty much it. And then he's killed, and and that's a wrap on that character. It's just, he wasn't used. He was essentially a wasted character. I feel like you could have done a lot more with him. Have Pennywise use him a lot more as his tool to go against them as adults, the way that he did when he was a kid. But instead, all we see is a couple scenes with him in the asylum thing, on bed, talking with Pennywise. And then the only meaningful scene that he has as an adult is his little tussle with Mike. And that's it. And then he's killed off. And it's like, really? You're just gonna waste the character for just the one scene? Like, you could have used him a lot better as an adult and a lot more, creating plot and tension for your characters along the way. Instead, it's just the one scene with Mike that we get that really did anything for the character. That was a little disappointing. And then I felt like the acting with the kids was a little weak. Some of them felt certainly more seasoned than others. The kid that played the kid version of Bill, he was pretty seasoned. I thought he did a decent job. The girl that played Beverly, I thought she did a pretty decent job. But the other kids, they didn't really feel very seasoned. And maybe they weren't, but just their delivery, the way that they play the characters, there just wasn't a lot of energy or charisma there with them. I felt like they were just kind of flat, a lot of them. And I'm a little easy on them because they're kid actors, I get it, but yeah, that their acting was a little weak for me as well. But that's pretty much it. Those are my thoughts on it from 1990. My overall rating here would be 3 stars, 3 out of 5. I do still think it's a good movie overall. It is a movie that I like. I will still see it more again in the future, but it doesn't hold up as well watching it as an adult, as seeing it when you're a kid. I think it definitely works better seeing it as a kid than as an adult. Tim Curry is still awesome. We'll always love him as Pennywise. He will always be my Pennywise. He's really what makes this film as good as it is. But yeah, 3 stars for It 1990. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Do you agree with my rating? Is this your favorite It? Is Tim Curry your favorite Pennywise? Let me know anything and everything you want to let me know in the comment section. Thank you guys for tuning in. And as always, until next time, kick it and rock on.